Affinity has released a new free version, and if you've been following my Affinity Publisher 2 tutorials, you're probably wondering whether everything you've learned still applies. The short answer is yes. In this video, I'm going to show you what's actually different about the new version of Affinity, what hasn't changed, and exactly how I configure the new version so that it behaves almost identically to Affinity 2 when publishing TTRPG products. Because greetings gamers, I'm Anto, and I'm a professional writer and game designer who designs and publishes all my own books using Affinity. And on this channel, I help GMs and indie designers use practical tools to play more and prep less, and help you break into publishing if that's your goal. So if that sounds like your kind of thing, hit the subscribe button for more videos just like this. Now, I've spent the last few weeks integrating the new version of Affinity into my workflow and using it to make some sample products so I can see whether or not I wanted to use it going forward. And the good news is you really don't need to relearn everything or really anything once you've set it all up. All the advice from the previous videos in this series are still going to apply when using the new version of Affinity, and if you don't want to switch for any reason, you'll still be able to follow along with future episodes. The buttons might just look a little bit different or be in a slightly different place. The new version of Affinity is available for free, which makes it super accessible for all game masters and designers. You get the functionality of all three of the previous Affinity apps, Publisher, Designer, and Photo, baked into one unified app, so it's more easy to use all of those features than ever before. And today I'm going to show you how the new Affinity app works. I'm going to show you how to set up the layout mode so it matches how we've been using Affinity 2 in this series up until now, and give you an Affinity file that's already set up using the settings I use so you can dive in and start creating straight away. Now, before we start rearranging things, I want to answer a couple of common questions. First of all is, can I open my Affinity 2 files within the new version of Affinity? The answer is yes. Once you open them and save them as a .af file though, you won't be able to open them in Affinity 2. This is just like how compatibility worked between Affinity version 2 and the previous Affinity 1. Next, as far as I've found, all the keyboard shortcuts seem to be the same as they were, and they're dependent on which studio space you're working in. But you can change most of them really easily by going to Edit, Settings, and Shortcuts. So let's dive into the new Affinity and take a look at how I set it up to match my workflow the best. Okay, so here we are in the new Affinity, and the first thing that I want to do is I want to set it up so my workspace looks like Affinity 2, just to make my life easier and to make sure I've got everything where I want it to. This is super easy. If for any reason you've been doing stuff in the new Affinity and you've got it looking different and you want to follow along with this, the way you can do that is come up to Window, go into Panels, and then either hit Reset or start rearranging things, and then you can add or manage presets here. So you can see I've already got my layout set up as a preset in the Windows section already, but we're going to rebuild it from scratch just so that you can see how to do that. To do that, we're going to switch between the new version of Affinity. I'm just going to keep calling it Affinity 3 because it's easier, and Affinity 2. And if I do, you can see that they are very, very similar. You have the panel on the left, which is where you'll find your pages, your assets, and then anything else that you pin there. You have your main working area in the center where you put your boards or your spreads. So I think the first thing that I want to do is I want to import some of the assets I have made. So over the years in Affinity 2, I have a number of assets that I reuse in multiple projects, things like my company logo or logos for projects or dice icons, all of those kind of things, trade dress, backgrounds for images, you know, the splash art for images, all that kind of stuff that gets reused through projects all go into the Assets tab in Affinity 2, and I want to reuse those in Affinity 3. So we're going to jump into Affinity 2 here. We're going to come to the Assets tab. We're going to find the tab that we want to duplicate, which is default 2 for me, and then we're going to click on the hamburger menu and hit export. Then we just save that file wherever we want to, come into Affinity 3, go into Assets, and then click on the drop down and click Import Assets. And that will allow you to import all of your assets and get all of the same stuff that you had in Affinity 2 back into Affinity 3. Just doing that one thing immediately makes it feel more like home for me. The next thing that I do is a really trivial thing, but I like to make sure that the side panels are of a similar kind of size. And to do this, I literally just put my finger on the screen and resize my side panels so that they match. And that might sound a little bit ridiculous, and it kind of is a little bit ridiculous, right? But when you are working in a piece of software day in, day out, and especially when you're doing this professionally, you really get used to those kind of creature comforts. You get used to the muscle memory of things. And that is one of the biggest reasons why you don't change onto new software, new updates, is because you just get stuck in your ways and you're like, well, I know where I need to click and where everything is in the thing I'm already using, which is one of the best things about Affinity 3 is you can set it up so that virtually it is identical to Affinity 2. And with one or two exceptions, which we'll come to now, you can just press all of the same buttons that you used to. Now, the biggest exceptions to where things are the same and different is that in Affinity 2, you had all of these ribbon buttons up at the top, specifically for rotating and transformation. They were broken out into separate buttons, whereas in Affinity 3, they are nested into one transform tool. So if I go ahead and make a new project here and just put in a box, you can see that the transform tools are nested, whereas they used to all be in one block and take up a little more real estate. You can see I've gone ahead and put them in a block up here to more quickly access them. And to do that, all I've done is right click on this toolbar at the top, click customize toolbar, and find the buttons that I want and just drag them onto that little white space at the top where it's highlighted, and it will place those new buttons there. But really speaking, that is about the only difference that I have noticed between the two versions, between Affinity 2 and 3, from a practical use case point, is the buttons in the toolbar are slightly different. The next thing that I like to do after importing my assets, making sure everything is sized appropriately and getting my toolbar sorted, is I want to finish filling out the left panel. So I make extensive use of the left panel when I'm using the layout in Affinity 3 or when I was using Publisher in Affinity 2. And I use it for a lot of things like anchors, tags, pre-flight, a whole bunch of options that can be nested in that left panel. If we jump into Affinity 2 here, you can see that it's actually pretty dense in here. So I have stock images, I have find and replace, I have all of my pre-flight information. This is where Affinity will tell you if there are any problems it has detected before you export your document. I have all of the books functionality, so being able to make separate books within a document. Tags, which is how you tag your images to give them alt text. Anchors, which is how you place PDF bookmarks within your document. Pinning, which is an excellent way to make text and images or text and breakout boxes flow together on the page. And we are going to talk more about that in a future episode. Hyperlinks, which is exactly what it sounds like. And then you can pretty much add anything that you want to this panel. So the next thing that I want to do is fill this out in Affinity 3. To do that, we're going to go into Affinity 3, we're going to come up to Window, and everything that we want to access for changing the UI basically is up here in Window. So in general, we have a bunch of different options for assets and brushes and exporting layers and links and all of that kind of stuff. But I know that most of what I want is going to be in the layout section. So I know that I'm going to want pre-flight, and I know that I'm going to want tags. So we click on both of those, and if it brings it out as a little hovering box, you can just drag it into one of the panels left or right really easily. So I do that for my left panel, I do it for my right panel, make sure I've got all of the brushes and everything included there so it makes sense for the way that I work. And then once that is all done, it'll look like this. It'll have all of the panels on the left. It'll have all of the brushes and panels on the right. And it is basically identical to Affinity 2. And then if I go ahead and open a document, in this case, one of the work in progress class cheat sheets for D&D 5.5 or the 2024 version of D&D, everything just feels like Affinity 2. Everything is where it should be based on my use case. And now I can just use Affinity 3 exactly the same way that I've been using Affinity 2. So as you can see, with a little setup, you can make a near seamless transition from Publisher 2 into the new Affinity app. To finish off today, I've made a template which you can use to get started with your own projects, and that is linked down in the description below. This template sets up the color space, the margins, the bleed, and it puts a number of master pages in place to help you build and create your document. There's pages with the guides that are going to help you design your trade dress in a way that won't interfere with text or be cut off by the printing process. And I've also included some tips on setting up your initial pages, as well as some things to make sure to include on your back cover as well. Combined with the videos in this series, it should get you up and running and creating some stunning books in no time at all. Now, I'll be using the new free version of Affinity for all my future tutorials in this series because it lowers the barrier for entry for new creators. But as I've hopefully shown in this video, if you're still using Publisher 2, you're not missing out on anything that's super critical, and you'll still be able to follow along with all the future videos. If you want to keep watching, check out this video on color spaces and print colors, which is one of the most important things to get right when you're getting into publishing. But until next time, happy gaming.